Hi, everybody. So, last talk of the conference. I'm just going to go ahead and call this a closing keynote. No, just the hell of it. So, I'm just going to ask a quick question to the audience. So, who here bought Bitcoin when it was $100? Yeah? Who here can help me find half a Bitcoin which I've lost? No one? Oh, damn it. Okay, so for those of us who aren't Bitcoin millionaires, we probably want to earn some money, right? Well, that's great, because I'm going to show you a guaranteed 100% foolproof way of earning money. So, has anybody heard of this guy? Okay, so this guy is the President of the United States of America. And whatever you feel about this guy, two things are true. He loves Twitter, he loves to tweet, and he's very influential. So you can see here, 100,000 likes on a tweet. Who wouldn't want that? But some people argue that he's so influential that he moves markets. So in this tweet, something negative was said about Toyota Motors. And at that exact moment in time, the price of Toyota Motor went down. Who listens to this podcast? Anybody? Yeah, okay, awesome. So the Planet Money podcast, one of my favorite podcasts, they realized, or they got this idea late last year, which was, well, what if you could build a trading bot which could make money based off of Trump's tweets? Now, at this point, I have to say that I am not affiliated. I am not affiliated with NPR or Planet Money. They have not endorsed me or my company, but I have asked them to be able to talk about their project, which is quite fun. So what they did, they basically hired a high-frequency trading firm who created a trading bot, which made trades based off of Trump's tweets. And they created they posted all that stuff on Twitter. So if you go to Twitter, to BOTUS, you can actually find the trading engine that they created. But unfortunately, kind of in November last year, they had to shut it down. I mean, these are just podcasters. They put their own money into it. It was coming up to Christmas. They wanted the money again. And everybody was really sad about this, including Donald Trump. I know so because he said so. But don't worry, because today I'm going to show you how to create your very own BOTUS. So who am I? My name is Asim Hussain. You can find me on Twitter and various other places as Joe Ake. Not Joashe, but Joe Ake. I blog about Angular and JavaScript on my site, codecroft.tv. And I'm also what's called a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. So I work kind of in the Azure team. And I'm somebody who's supposed to be a conduit between developers such as yourselves and the PMs in the Azure team. So if you've got anything really good to say about Azure, come speak to me afterwards. Or bad. Okay, or bad. Yeah, whatever. And I'm going to talk to you today about how to build kind of BOTUS using tools that we have in Azure, but some of those things are also available on a bunch of other platforms like Google Cloud or Amazon. If I'm going to describe something which is only available on Azure, I'll just tell you it's only available on Azure, and I'll try to describe kind of the other things in the other platforms which are similar to Azure as well. So what are the rules of the trading engine? If it's a positive tweet, it buys $100 of the currency of the country which the tweet is about. If it's a negative tweet, it will sell all of the currency of that country that the tweet is about. If it's US dollar, then it inversely buys or sells gold. So if you say something negative about America, you want to buy gold. Opposite way, the other way around. The positions are held forever. I'm not a high-frequency trader. I'm not even a very good trader. So the positions are held for a long time. And no money was harmed in the creation of this bot because everything is 100% simulated. So this is the actual kind of, the web app, the web interface of the app. So you can see here is the list of tweets. This is a recording from 5 days ago. So this one is a positive tweet. It's got a green positive score. This is actually, he was posting something positively about a march that was happening in the US, which was actually a march against Trump, which is quite interesting. This is a negative tweet, so it's saying something about immigration. I'm not too sure what, but it's a negative tweet from Trump, and you can see here it's also extracted kind of keywords from the tweet as well. And there's this tweet, so what I can say from this is that the term America first, we can't really detect if that's positive or negative. But we do know it's about America. We do know it's about America. So that's one part of it. Let's move forward. Okay, then we've got the trades view. So this is all the trades that have happened from this bot. You can see past few days it's been buying Mexican peso. So positive tweets have been posted about Mexican peso, and then on the last day, must have posted something negative about Mexico because it sold all the Mexican pesos and bought US dollar instead. Then moving to the portfolio, so after all the trades, you kind of sum up all the trades that you've got. So kind of since inception, borrowed about $2,000, split that across a bunch of different currencies, and in the end, made a $83 profit. Yeah, told you, it's going to make you rich, yeah? So what are you going to learn in this talk? Now, here's the thing. I didn't really create Botus to make money. I created it because I think it's just a really great demonstrator of two of the things that I'm really excited about in 2018, which is AI and serverless. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you calculate the sentiment of a tweet. And hopefully through talking about that, I'll show you why I think 2018 is the year that the JavaScript developer gets into AI. But the hardest part of Botus, really is just the sentiment analysis, right? Once you know if a tweet is positive or negative, the rest of the app is pretty unsurprising. It's just checking to see if some value is less than some other value and then making a fake trade. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about something else I'm really passionate about, which is serverless technology. And I'm going to explain why I think serverless is just the perfect companion to single-page applications. I'm going to explain that throughout the course of this talk. And if you've seen kind of intro to serverless technology talks before, stick around, I am going to go a lot deeper. And the app is written in Node and Angular, but I'm not going to actually show you any JavaScript. I think there's one slide with some JavaScript. I'm going to talk about AI and serverless. But most importantly, you have to pay attention, because there's going to be a quiz. So, forgot to put those on. Let's go sentiment analysis to begin with. So, with sentiment analysis, the one we're doing is basically it ranges from 0 to 1, 0 being very negative, 1 being very positive. What do you think the sentiment score of this piece of text is? Negative. It starts from 0, but yeah, it's actually very close to negative. It's 0.014. And that's actually one of the really cool things about using Trump as an example for this, because the words that he uses are actually really easy for a computer to understand, right? No, I don't. As in, I didn't mean that as an insult. I meant there's not a lot of double negatives. He's very clear with his words. It's everything is very, very good or very, very bad, right? So, so to do sentiment analysis, we first have to start off with a training set. Okay, so you might have a corpus of data. So I love you, and somebody's actually gone through and said I love you is positive. Somebody's gone through and said I hate you is negative. No way I love that is positive. This is rubbish is negative. Let's meet at 10 p.m. Well, I suppose it depends on the context, right? But sentiment, you need to go through, you need to get some training data, and you need to do some manual effort, categorize it. And actually, sentiment is subjective. So for somebody, something positive might be some negative for somebody else. So you need to get a large training set. And then what you do is you pump that training data through something called a classifier. Now, you can have different classifiers. You can have a Bayesian or something deep learning. You can have a whole bunch of different types of classifiers. But at the end of the day, the output is a model. So you can think of a model as essentially just a big function. You can pump in inputs, and it gives you an output. So, for instance, we can then pump in future values like I love you, and it might pump out the number 1. I hate you might say 0, might say 0.5 for no way I love that, this is rubbish, 0.3, and lets me at 10 p.m. it doesn't know if it's positive or negative. And you can put that model anywhere you want. It's pretty static, right? Well, depending on the type of model, it can be pretty static. You can put it on a USB drive, you can pass it around, you can share it, you can check it into GitHub, you can do what you want. You can also just wrap an API around it and sell it. That's what we do, right? So you do at Microsoft, and so a lot of people are doing these days. They're building models, they're training them up, and they're making them available to everybody through APIs. So this is the part of what's called a cognitive analysis service from Microsoft. There's a bunch of other people doing the same thing. Google's doing a lot of this stuff as well. Now, what I love about these cognitive service APIs is just how easy they are to use. So if you can make a HTTP request, you can do AI. And this is what I'm predicting personally from what I'm seeing, is there's going to be an explosion of easily accessible AIs in 2018, sorry. Ooh. There was some in 2017, but I'm seeing some stuff coming through the works that's really, really exciting. So for instance, we've got some stuff in our labs, which isn't public yet, which you can, for your website or app, you can train up the camera to detect certain gestures, and you can create completely custom interactions for your app or website coming through. That's the stuff coming through. One thing I have a lot of fun with these days is we've got an API that detects emotion. So you can give it an image and finds each face in the image and tells you how happy or sad or depressed it is. I have a lot of fun with that API. Oops. So coming back to the app, another thing that it does is it also extracts out the key phrases. So for instance, that API I pointed you, it also extracts out the fact that Mexico was mentioned in this tweet, which is really useful when you're trying to build a trading engine. You need to find out which country is it talking about. And that's it pretty much. That API is what I use. So it gets you the sentiment analysis of the tweet and also the key phrases. And those are two of the most complex parts, really, of being able to build a trading engine like this. So the next thing I really want to talk about is serverless. So who's heard of serverless before in this audience? Okay, a fair amount. Who's actually using serverless right now in their projects? 1, 2, 3, 4. So not many people. So good. So if you've not heard about it before, it might seem a bit of a confusing concept at first, because really everything uses a server somewhere, right? I mean, we're not hosting on unicorns. So I've got my own explanation of what serverless is, and I think it's kind of something that I like to, that's the way I like to talk about serverless. Which, imagine this is perhaps like the load or usage of your web application over time, right? Back in the old days, what we used to have to do is basically predict all of the load. Maybe you'd have to like look at a month's worth of usage and see how many servers would I need to handle the peak load. But that's really hard to do, and you had to buy the servers to handle all of that load. Then kind of VMs came along, and infrastructure as a service. And what it enabled us to do is basically spin up servers up and down automatically. But it's still a problem, right? Like, what if you scale up too fast? What if you detected that you're getting a higher load, you onboarded a bunch of servers, but you onboarded too many servers? And what if you detected the load was going down, so you shut down too many servers? Predicting load is a really, really hard question, and it's a really hard thing to get right. And the key thing is you still have to pay for these servers. You didn't touch them, you didn't need them, you still got to pay for them. So ideally you want something like this. Okay, you ideally want something where somebody else does the scaling automatically for you, right? And you only end up paying for what you use. And the unit of usage isn't actually a server. So this is my definition of serverless. It probably differs from like the dozen other definitions of serverless you're seeing these days, right? But you pay only for actual usage and not for predicted usage. So you don't have to predict how much you're going to use and pay for it. You just get charged at the end of the month for how much you actually use. And also auto-scaling is coming along. So, quiz time. Who's paying attention? Let me ask you a question. That API I pointed you to, Is that serverless? Everything has a server somewhere, right? But with the API I pointed to, you don't know about the API, you don't know how it's priced, but most APIs, you pay only for what you use, right? You don't have to predict, you don't have to tell them, hey, this month I'm going to make this many invocations, how much is that going to cost? No, you pay only for what you use. Underneath it, of course, there's servers running it, and of course, those are being scaled up and down. So APIs, like Text Analytics API, is serverless. Is a SQL database serverless? No? What if you had a SQL database where I just said to you, hey, use whatever you want. I'll just send you a bill at the end of the month. Don't worry about it. That'll be serverless, right? And there are some, so AWS and a bunch of other people, people are building now serverless databases where you don't have to tell them up front what size you want, you just get charged at the end of the month. Static sites. Are they serverless? Yeah. I mean, if you've got a website or a static site that's hosting your whatever it is, and you find out tomorrow you're going to be on #1 Hacker News, you don't run to your static site hosting provider and then do, what are you going to do? You're not going to do nothing, right? You don't have to do anything. But at the end of the day, there are servers hosting this thing, and the servers are going to scale up and down automatically, right? So that's the first bombshell. The static sites are serverless. I love telling people that because then they're like, oh my God, so I've been using serverless for 5 years already. Yes, you have. You've been using serverless for 5 years already. But the Botus web app I showed you, it's an SPA. Okay? And SPAs, if you're doing it properly, should be hosted as a static site. So it's already serverless. But what about all the other back-end code that you need in order to run your site? So this is the only JavaScript you're going to see. This is actually the controller code that processes a tweet, loads a portfolio, figures out which country it's all about, and processes the engine itself, right? Figures out if you actually need to do a trade. I need to run this somewhere, but my SPA is running on a static site, and I don't have a server to run it on, so where do I run my code? This is where people sometimes, like I find it, this is where people suddenly start thinking, oh, I need a server. Okay, I need a server to host something somewhere, right? But you don't. Now we can use something called FASes, Functions as a Service. And this is another flavor of serverless technology. Okay, just to explain what FASes are. So before, back in the day, if you had a request, it needs to be executed in some function on your server. That might be a root. The framework might be running on is Express. That needs to sit on an OS, and you have some hardware. You could be responsible for all that yourself to begin with, right? But then people didn't want that, so we invented IaaSes, which basically you made the hardware is now somebody else's responsibility, okay? But you're still responsible for the operating system, the framework, and your actual function itself. Then we said, we don't want that. So we went, okay, fine, we'll give you PaaSes. It's platform as a service. So then it's one step level of abstraction more. So we handle the hardware, the operating system. You just can run your framework, Express or whatever. And now there's one even more, which is FASes, which is just the function itself, just that smallest unit of functionality. There's a bunch of different ways to, and then on Amazon, it's called Lambda. On Google, it's called Google Cloud Functions. On IBM, it's OpenWhisk. And on Azure, it's called Azure Functions. And we charge by gigabyte seconds and executions, right? So you don't have to predict usage. You just, at the end of the month, you get a bill for the number of executions and how many gigabytes each execution took, but times how many seconds it took to take. But each function is limited to, each invocation is limited to 5 minutes, and the whole thing is stateless, right? So there's some of the limitations. So there's a couple of ways you can actually set these things up. You can set them up with it via a web portal, which demos really well, but really isn't that useful in my opinion, because quite often with these functions you need to import multiple libraries and it just involves multiple files, right? So I like to use VS Code. I'm a recent convert over to VS Code, and now I can't stop talking about it. So there's a great extension for it, and then I was showed this by the guy who runs VS Code the other day. Just click in, you create a function project, you add a function, a HTTP function, you put it in, and then what I didn't realize is it also sets up the debug configuration. So all you now have to do is press F5, and boom, right? You're already running and debugging a serverless function in about 30 seconds. And all of them have kind of got similar tooling like this, right, these days, or getting to the point we've got similar tooling. It's really, really fast to get up and running. So I've got my SPA running on static hosting, so it's serverless. I'm using this third-party APIs, Text Analytics. That's serverless. And now with FAS, I can host my own API on a FAS platform, so that's serverless, right? And this is where all the other demos tend to stop, right? But there's this other really big problem, which is what do you do with your non-API code, right? So, what do you do with non-API code? Like with your SPA, it's the thing that orchestrates everything else. It's the thing that decides, okay, I'm going to make this API request. I'm going to keep the state of what's going on. I'm going to last for as long as the browser tab is open. I can keep control of everything. I can orchestrate the whole thing. But what orchestrates the back end of your business logic, right? There's always stuff that you need to do to build an application which isn't an API. Sending emails, for instance, for ours, we need to listen to tweets and perform trades. It's got nothing to do with user interaction. So we need something that's called it's an orchestrator process. And this is a concept that's coming up in serverless and FAS, is this idea of another layer to the whole process which orchestrates all of your FAS functions. So you need something long-running and needs to be stateful. And this is where, when I look at people's architectures, they tend to just dump a server in it somewhere. So they've got this huge FAS architecture with a server right in the middle, right? Orchestrating everything else. And that server needs to deal with scaling and a bunch of other issues. So another thing you can do is called logic apps. This is on AWS. They've got something called step functions, which is similar. But in Azure, it's called logic apps. And there's also something called durable functions, which are coming up with as well, right? I really love logic apps. I think they're really, really easy to use. Who's used like Zapier or IFTT? Things like that. Right, okay. So imagine this is like Zapier on steroids, right? So it's got a bunch of connectors where you can start workflows like cron jobs, or when a file is dropped into a storage account, or when a message gets put on a queue. It's also got connected for Twitter. So my team, we basically build so many Twitter bots because of this. So you can see here, I just add a connector for real Donald Trump, which is the Donald Trump account. And we can also like plug in connectors for all of that sentiment analysis stuff that I showed you earlier on. And you can see here it's also got like control flow loops as well. So you can add a little bit of programming logic in here if you want. But it's pretty cool. And also it can then finally connect to serverless function and pass it in. So this is not initiated by an API. This is just initiated on the server by itself. And the whole thing is still serverless. Logic app is serverless. This is serverless. All of this stuff is still serverless. Now the back end of your application can also be serverless. But if that's not your bag, if you don't like dealing with kind of like drag and drop interfaces, and you want to get down into some JavaScript code and manage your application like that, we've also got durable functions. Now this is actually only Azure specific, so there's nothing on AWS yet for this, but we're all kind of copying each other, so I'm pretty sure they're going to come up with something soon. So with durable functions, these are like they're like long running, but not continuously running. Okay, so you can almost think of it like generators. We've all stopped using generators now, haven't we? Now that we're using async await, but like generator functions. So basically, they wake up, do a bit of processing, then yield, and they say, "Oh, wake me up in like 20 minutes." Wake up, do a bit of processing, yield. But the difference is, the kind of weird thing is about them is that the process doesn't stay in memory. Completely exits memory, comes back in again, and we figured out a way of kind of getting you back to the exact state in your function that you were before, and it executes from there. So that's it, really. So this is how I built Botus. I use a text analytics API to calculate sentiment and figure out what a tweet is about. That's kind of the most important thing. The web app is an SPA. And if SPA is hosted on a static site, it's serverless. Okay, that's a kind of a key takeaway here. If you're using a static site, you're using serverless. And if you're using serverless for your static site, everything else might as well be serverless, right? If you need to build an API, use a FAS. Then you're still serverless. And then if you need to orchestrate something on your back end, something that isn't initiated as an API request, use something like logic apps or step functions and use these things to orchestrate your applications, to orchestrate all the serverless functions in your applications. So that's it. If you want to play around, I play around a lot with cognitive services and a lot of these AI APIs. I created a link here. You can go through, and if you want to, you can just click and try an API without actually having to sign up. Well, you have to put your email address in. You have to go through the whole sign-up process. You can try it out. Thank you very much for your time.